Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the CyberGizmo, we're going to be talking about an open source firewall called Pfsense. Right after this. Pfsense is a product, and it is copyrighted as far as its commercial use, but it is still an open source security suite, and it is hosted by Netgate. You can download it for free. You can use it for free. The only thing you cannot do is go out and redistribute it with maybe a distribution that you have or something like that. You cannot do that, and you cannot do it with commercial intent either. The license prevents you from doing that. But there's a number of ways that you can set this up. So let's talk about some of the easier ways first. So the easiest way to set this up is to take an old piece of hardware that you have. And, you don't want to get it too old, because what you really want is you're going to want some of the more modern elements that are available in some of the more modern processors. But if you have a machine that's, say, maybe 6 years old or maybe a little bit older, those probably would be a good candidates. But machines that are probably 12 years old and 13 years old, no, those probably aren't really good candidates, simply because they do not have like ESNI encryption that's built into the chip. So, all that does is it just puts the burden back on the processor in order to encrypt and decrypt packets that are coming in and out of the system. So, what can we do? Well, let's just do this first. So, if you have an old piece of hardware, you're going to need at least 2 Ethernet ports in order to do this. One for your WAN and then one for your LAN. If you want to set up additional networks within your house or within your business, you of course are going to need additional network ports for the firewall as well, because it's really meant to manage all of those, whether they be external facing or they're managing internal networks. It really wants to be the hub, and so that's really the role it should probably play. So one of the things you can do is I would recommend going with Intel. Simply because it's better supported, and there is there's several of them. This is one of them, although this one's quite pricey. You can usually you can usually find like the Intel Pro 1000 gigabit quad port cards. It's a PCIe network card, and you can usually find them in eBay for about $25. I've seen them on Amazon for about $55 or so, and it really depends on what you can find. But these are very well supported inside of, and of course Pfsense runs FreeBSD, so these are well supported inside. There's a number of other ones as well. You can look on the list on their site; they'll tell you which ones they support. And you'll find it in the manuals. But the other thing you can do, if you don't want to bother with that, is Netgate sells hardware as well. And you can start with like the SG-1100. These will run, these machines are small. They're like, this one is ARM-based, but it supports three ports. It is a Marvel Armada 3720 LP, and that is an ARM Cortex A53 dual processor, and that runs at 1.2 gigahertz. You don't need a lot of speed for these things in order to flip packets. Where you might need additional performance is if you're doing deep packet inspection, or whether you're generating reports, or you've got some of the other software utilities that are built into as options into Pfsense if you want those. But I don't know what the cost of this is. I suppose we'll have to put it in the cart to find out, right? Let's see. $179. So, for an ARM-based board of that caliber, that's a little high, but everything in there is set up by Netgate, and you are supporting them. So what else could you do? There is, let's go over here for just a second. I don't know if the Protect Tele is in here. I think that's them. Yeah, there's one right there. So there's two of them right here. There's one that has a 4-port, and these are kind of interesting in that these are Celeron based, and they have the same ports that Pfsense labels. So you have the WAN port, LAN port, Opt1, and Opt2. Those are the defaults. That sells for about $350. And that is a quad-core Celeron processor. It does have AES-NI support built into it. It's got 8 gig of RAM and 128 gigabyte of mSATA SSD. You could certainly build a PC for a lot less than that. You don't need a lot of resources for this, but if you need more than 4 ports, there's this one. This one's a 6-port model, and this is also a Vault. It's a Core i5 though that you're getting into here. So these are going to use a little bit more energy than the Celeron based ones are, of course. But same thing. They're labeled WAN, LAN, Opt1, Opt2, 3, 4, all the way down. So these are optional LANs, and then you can use those for whatever you wish. They do not come with, I think these are bare bones. So this one is bare bones, yeah. So you would need to add on to this cost of $539. You would have to add on the additional cost of the mSATA drive and the memory. And they use just SODIMMs. They're DDR4, 2400 MT per second. So yeah, and then there's a number of other ones that are out here too. That there's some similar ones that are made by other companies like Kutum, but that work. I've tried. I've also run this on some of the other NUCs that are around as well. So, but yeah, you can go this route, or you can roll your own, get your own machine and use an Intel board. And so forth. But the reason why I'm on this page is I need to go and download this software. So that'll be in the download section. And there's release notes here for the version if you want to read that. I need an AMD 64-bit, and I need a CD image. And now I'm going to pick somewhere close to me, and we'll just save that. I don't know why it bounced like that, but it did. Anyway, it's done. It's not very big. I think that was a total of, 372 megabytes, so it's not very big. So that's all I need on this page, other than I probably will leave this up here. I'll go ahead and close these down, though. So let's go over here and configure Now, I already have been playing with this a little bit, so let's go configure a second copy of Pfsense. We'll call it Pfsense 2. This is BSD. It is the 64-bit version, as far as I know. And you don't need a lot of RAM for this. RAM is going to be dependent on how many active ports you have, how many active workstations you have, and of course what you're doing with the optional packages. But as you'll see, it doesn't take a lot of disk either. But again, if you're logging a lot of, or you're tracing, or you're doing some kind of diagnostic work, you might need additional space. Yeah, we'll go ahead and create that. And then I'll need to do some more configuration here. The first thing I need is the first adapter will make a NAT. The first adapter will put on the WAN. The second one will enable and will make that bridged. Now, I'm a little concerned that this might rectangle around and grab my gateway and then find its way out without going through the firewall. But we'll see it. We'll check that and make sure that it doesn't do that. And the other thing is, I will need to configure the drive so that it. I'm waiting for it. I don't think it did it. No, it didn't. Well, it says it did, but let's see if it did. That's all I need. Well, let's just bring it up. No, it didn't find it, so. It might be a bug. There certainly have been a number of them in this lately. So this is, if you remember the video on FreeBSD, the installation is a C program. I'm going to try to expand that up so you can see. Not too much of interest here. It's just starting up into the utility to actually do the installation. So yeah, it's telling you that Pfsense is a federally registered trademark of electric sheep fencing, and blah, blah, blah. Don't sell it. So we're going to do a normal install, and it has exactly the same configuration for the localization. So whatever language that you need, you can configure. Now, I can choose between Auto ZFS and Auto UFS. Auto UFS is the original, which we can't say Unix-like file system is what we have to say now, but UFS was originally the Unix file system. Yeah, sorry about that, trademark holders, but that's what it was called. And it probably is a little bit overkill to use ZFS on a single drive, but there are some advantages to doing that, like maybe you want to encrypt it, encrypt the ZFS drive, and maybe you want to be able to take snapshots. If you want to do that, I'll leave that up to you, but for today, I don't think we need a very complicated installation for this. And just like FreeBSD, this doesn't take very long to install. It just puts out the base, configures it, that's it, and it's done. The last thing it says is, hey, do you want to open a shell to make any last-minute modifications? No, but I am going to. Yeah, too late. It's already rebooting. So I'm going to try to catch this and shut this down because it's already coming back up. It's going to go right back into the. To the installation again, because that's the way FreeBSD is the way it kind of is. So let's see, I want to stop this. Close, power off, die. Okay, so now I gotta go get rid of my storage here. So we'll take that out. Hopefully this will go out. Let's see. Yep, it emptied. All right, now it should start up from the hard drive. It'll probably work a lot better. Okay. So really what I want to do today is just kind of give you a feel for Pfsense and some of the capabilities that it has. There are a number of videos, of course, that are on YouTube, and I plan to do some more. This isn't my last one. Today I'm just going to kind of run through a basic setup with a WAN and a LAN, and then in future videos, based on what you guys want to see, I'll try to direct this down the path. I do use Pfsense here. I have the same version up and running in production, and I do have a number of features that I use in it in order to separate out my network. Now, in order to isolate devices like IoT devices from my standard LAN, my standard work area. So the first thing you'll see here is it's found the WAN and the LAN addresses, and it has configured the first one with a DHCP address. But the LAN address is going to default to 192.168.1.1. If you're happy with that, great. But there's some reasons that you might want to consider moving that. Particularly if you're bringing together VLANs that might just happen to share the same space, the 1.1 might collide, and then you might have some problems with that. So I'm going to reassign the IP address. I'm going to select 2, which is the LAN. Oops. We'll select 246, and then it's asking me for the CIDR, and that'll be a typical net mask. Depends on how many devices that you have on the network, but this gives me a full 255, plus the ones that are used for broadcast. So anyway, a 24 is the same as 255, 255.0. So enter the new upstream gateway address for the LAN. Just press enter. We don't have to do anything there. I don't really want to configure an IPv6, so I'm just going to hit enter again. Do I want to enable it? No, I already have DHCP on the network, so I don't need that. This is asking me if I want to revert back from HTTPS to HTTP. No, I don't. And then it gives me the URL that I'll use to access the web configurator. So essentially we're done there. So I need to push this out of the way and go to the browser. Hopefully it's up. Yep, and you'll see immediately it's a self-signed certificate, and Firefox is complaining about that. The default password is admin and Pfsense, all lowercase. And then it's going to go. Let's see. What's it say? Yeah, you need to change the password. Yeah, it's gonna bark about that. So it says kind of if you want to learn more about this, great. I'll show you some things that you can find that's online here that'll help you with configuring this, or just starting to explore and play around with it a little bit. You can purchase support, and that support is used to fund additional work on the software to add features. The next thing is to give the server a host name and a domain, and then if you want to plug into your DNS servers, you can do that. I don't need to do that. I'm not planning on upgrading this today, so I'm just showing how it can work. And then the last one, let me back up here. Oops, I can't really do that, can I? I can resend it though. So is to pick up the time server and the time zone that I want. Now, if you want to put in your time zone, you can do that. Should be CST in here somewhere. Let's see. CET, no, get that one. So I could change that to my local. And at this point, you're going to configure the WAN interface. So it's DHCP. You can change that to static and then add whatever IP address and net mask and the upstream gateway. This would be if you had, usually your ISP provides some kind of device that has a really awful firewall in it. So that would generally serve as your bridge to get out onto the internet. So you would probably specify that device. The other thing is you'll notice that there's a number of other things here, like DHCP host and PPOE. Now, I wouldn't recommend using that, or PPTP. Those are kind of old protocols. Yeah, those go back a long way. These down here will generate firewall entries for the WAN that block private networks from entering via the WAN. Also, the Bogon networks. Bogon networks are IP addresses or IP ranges that have been identified by IANA that have either been hijacked, they're no longer active, and which is the case, they probably have been hijacked. And so if you come in, they're probably people up to no good. So if you want to block those, you can. For today, I'm just going to leave those in because that would be the default that you would see as well. And then then we go to the LAN interface. If there's any changes you want to make here, you can. And then, of course, we'll want to give it. And please do that. Don't leave this configured with, unless you really want trouble. Don't leave this configured with a default password. Oh, I got to go back. Maybe not. Let's try again. All right, so we go back, and then we'll try it again. I have to have a password failure at least once in a video. I mean, it wouldn't be me if I didn't. So, okay, so it's got the changes. It's going to reload the configuration, and then it should give me some options as what I can do next. This will take a couple seconds. Doesn't take very long. I can look for the updater. Chances are I just downloaded this, so I don't think I'll need one, but it is good to check this periodically. Now, they don't update very frequently, at least the packages. So you can sign up for an email alert, and they'll tell you if there's a new version that's either coming out or one that is out. Now, packages is a little bit different. They do update those as needed. If they find security issues in them, they will update patches. So they're really good about that. So then we get this little thing about, again, reminding us that no commercial distribution is allowed by the license, and you're accepting that. And then it's talking about improving and expanding PSPs, help us, or take the survey and help us direct it. This one is kind of a note card to say, hey, we have support available if you want to take advantage of it. We would sure like to have you because we use that money to support the development. I'm just going to close that one out. And so this is kind of the basic dashboard, the way it's set up out of the box. So you have this first panel over here, which kind of has just basic system information in it. And you'll see down here the CPU usage, 3%. That'll change as the network gets active. And memory usage, about 20% of that gig. So there's still quite a bit of memory left. And no swap being used. Disk use about 7%. So yeah, it's very lightweight. Doesn't take up a lot of space. Now, there's a couple of things I'm going to add here because I mean, it's nice to see that they're up, but I kind of figured they were already because I saw it on the main page. So I'd like to get some other information. So one of the things that I like to have is the gateway so that I know if they're online or if there's some kind of, this one is pending a DHCP request, which means that there is nothing on the other end to answer it. And there isn't because I haven't hooked up any cable for it to see. So there isn't actually a WAN that is actually functional to get me out to the internet. So that's okay for today. I mean, I just want to play with the software. I don't care about it working all the way through. You will when you start to deploy this, but for today, I don't. Let's see. The other thing I want is services. I kind of like that, like to know what all is running. This allows you to stop them or start them, and there's just a handful here that come with it. I'll show you the packages that you can install, and you can add on additional services if you wish. Let's see. There's one other thing that I want. I always like the traffic graphs. And then one other thing, the firewall logs. I just like to see those, and they kind of tell me of, hey, here's some stuff that's going on that maybe doesn't look right. So, interesting. Hasn't been up for more than about 5 minutes, and already they're knocking at the door. Okay, so what else what all does it do? So I guess the first thing to do is to start down through the system path. So the Advanced Manager allows you to set up additional things about your firewall, your administrative. So this is where you would change it from HTTPS to HTTP. If you can specify the maximum number of processes that this would be for the web configurator to run. The only time you would probably want to do that is if you had more users that were on the GUI. I can't imagine why you would do that. I mean, it is not multi-threaded. So, I mean, if you got multiple people in here making changes, chances are they could clobber each other. So I just can't imagine that you would want to do that. Yeah, anyway. Firewall in that, there's some additional things that you can add on here. So, yeah. The Bogon networks, you can have those updated monthly if you want. There's a number of things in here that do get updated frequently as tables to help you with managing the network for security. proxies if you want to set those up. System tunables. Unless you really know what you're doing, I wouldn't just go messing around with those. Not on BSD. You can mess around with them. Like I could mess around with them now. It doesn't matter. I could just restore it or snapshot it and then go mess around with them. And if I messed them up to the point where it didn't run anymore, just come back. You can load your own certificates. It does accept things like Let's Encrypt as well as other standard SSL certificates. Certificates are used for two things, well, many things, but the two primary things that certs are used for is you can obviously put a certification on the web browser. You can also attach certifications to the user ID. So if someone is wanting to log in to the system, you can require certifications to be attached to them to allow them to log in. Certifications are also used, of course, for OpenVPN, and this allows you to create and maintain those here. So there's a number of things that you can do here with this. I believe that Pfsense also supports 2FA. So if you have smart cards or you have other devices like the YubiKey or some of the other, like the Udo or something like that, or the Odo or whatever it's called. But you can do that. So, and then there's some general setup stuff like your DNS servers and your hosts, your forwarders, some of your localization. So this is where you would change kind of the configuration that it was asking us about in the wizard. Let's see. High availability. You can run multiples of these and then run them in so that they do fail over automatically. The package manager will list all the packages that are available, and you'll see like a certificate management environment. You'll see like ARPing, ARPWatch, AV-High, bind for a DNS server. You can run DNS services on Pfsense. Of course, you would probably want to run a failover to do that so that you have a spare DNS. Pre-radius is here, so if you want radius services, you can do that. The iPerf is a utility which does kind of basic throughput analysis. And Squid, let's see, NTOP NG. This is actually going through and producing its own. It has its own website that it creates kind of on the side of Pfsense. This does a lot of tracking on what kinds of traffic is coming in and going out of your network. So it can be used for a couple of things. One, it can kind of show you congestion in your connections, your routers, your gateways, as well as it might show things like a service that's having issues or having problems in communicating with another host, as well as it might show things like suspicious traffic as well. So there's a lot of different things that you can use for that. So it is a nice tool to have on there. I'll show you that in a future version of it, of the video where we'll go through more of this. Like I said, this isn't my first time. You can run Pfsense under a virtual machine, and there are, of course, the VMware tools that are available if you do that. There are some special considerations that you'll want to take care of when you install this on a VM to protect the isolation between your virtual network connections and the physical ones. But they talk about that in the documentation. So if you're interested in do that, just read up on that a little bit before you try it. And then there's a client exporter for OpenVPN. So you can configure your OpenVPN clients manually, or you can configure the server side of it and then export the configuration for the client. In the case of the Mac, it'll actually export viscosity bundle with it. So you basically have everything you need. However, I will tell you my experience on a Mac, OpenVPN, you're better off just downloading it because it's much faster than the viscosity version of the OpenVPN software. That's just my personal experience. It's just much faster. And then you have some other things here, like, let's see, Squid Guard, status traffic totals. There's Saracata, and did they get rid of Snort? Or did I just miss it? I probably missed it. There it is. Yeah, Snort's still here. So you don't want both of those. You don't want one or the other because Saracata uses Snort. And then there's some management things through Zabbix. So if you're interested in centralized management of your servers, now this wouldn't be probably for home, but if you had a small business, Zabbix is a free and open source system that allows you to set up management for your systems, and Pfsense participates in those. So if you're interested in that. Setup Wizard update, that's the update of the software. User Manager is, it's okay. It works. You can assign users various groups, which would then authorize them to do certain functions within Pfsense. There's also, you can put in groups. You can have settings to, do things like expire. If the session is idle, then you just boot them. And then you can have authentication, which gives you your additional support for 2FA. I think that would be the case. And then you can look at your interfaces. This is your list. And from here you can, now I don't have any additional ones, but if I did, they would show up as, if it saw 4 ports available to it, it would have WAN, LAN, then opt1, opt2, and then it wouldn't have anything assigned here, and then you could assign which port you wanted to give it to. So that appears automatically. Then there's interface groups, so if you want to group some of these together and then apply the same rules to it, it makes it a lot easier to do that. Of course, you have wireless support and VLANs. Now, one thing I'm going to say about VLANs, I know that people that work around networking all the time know this, but for those of you who do not confuse VLANs with security. VLANs are not meant to be to increase the security of a network. VLANs are supposed to help in managing separation of traffic on a network. So they serve to kind of isolate traffic that is localized so that it doesn't spill over onto the main sets of the network. But don't confuse them with being secure. They're not. They're very easy to break. But they do serve a useful purpose when you're trying to, that is how you increase bandwidth on a switch. So you use VLANs to aggregate and also separate different activities so that the network traffic stays within the group that is generating it, and then only the network traffic that needs to flow to another part of the LAN or outside of the organization needs to cross and then traverse the network to do that. So if you leave everything on the same IP address, all the traffic is just flowing all over the place, right? So that will of course cause collisions and all kinds of issues with performance later on as the network grows. So yeah, that is the purpose of VLANs. At least that's my opinion anyway. These are the same things that you saw when we were doing the setup. So this is the individual interface setup on WAN and LAN. Firewall. I'm going to skip all that and just go to the rules for the second. So you'll notice that the first thing it goes into is WAN. And you'll notice that we had those two things selected, block the private networks and block the bogon networks. Pfsense is really good about, remember what I said, I don't know how many people watch my videos in the past, but I've said this before, In secure environments, you want to lock to closed. You want to make sure that nothing is open until you decide to open it. You don't want to have some hidden protocol flying around that is insecure that you forgot to block. And so Pfsense, nothing can come into the WAN unless you allow it. Now, on the opposite side, LAN is free to go out. So, yeah, it'll go, in fact, anywhere. The LAN traffic can traverse anywhere over your network. So if you have additional networks that are in there, you might want to be cognizant of the fact that LAN is wide open, and if you have an opt1 and an opt2 that you don't want the basic LAN traffic to traverse, then you'll want to add additional firewall rules to LAN. Otherwise, it not only sees the WAN, it sees opt1, it'll see opt2 as well as any traffic on LAN, of course. It has an idiot rule just in case, because once in a while we all do stupid things, and we might accidentally block ourselves from accessing the web configurator. So there's a anti-lockout rule here that prevents you from accidentally doing that. Hopefully, it will prevent you from doing that. I don't think I've ever been caught by that, not yet. But knock on wood, there's plenty of time for it to happen. I'm sure it can. Anything can and will happen if you're tired and you're working on something. Schedules. This allows you to change firewall rules based on a schedule. So you can bring firewall rules in at a certain time of day and then take them out at certain times of day, and then change them around if you want to do different traffic flows, or if you're interested in blocking certain activities with at night or something like that. And then there's virtual IPs as well that's supported in this. Some of the services that you have here is I haven't talked about backups yet, so let me go do that first before we talk about the automation side of it. So Pfsense has a XML file that it generates that contains all of the configuration in the system that has been modified or is part of the default. So if I spit this out, I have everything except the packages that's in it. And it'll ask me to save the file. And it has the config, Pfsense, it has the domain. This is your host, this is your domain, and then a date, time stamp on it, and then an XML file. In the event that I need to restore something, maybe it got away from me, I configured it so that I don't know what happened, and some things are happening that just don't make sense, I can reload the backup before and get Pfsense back the way it was. The other thing where it's nice is if you're doing upgrades or you're moving it from one piece of hardware to another, the backups are also handy for that. Now, the only thing to look out for, of course, is that when you're moving to different hardware, the interface device names are going to be different. For example, on my machine here, it's EM0 and 1, but on using like the Intel board, I believe they're ITB 1 and 0. If they're Realtek, they're going to be RE0 and 1. And so, yeah, you could have differences in those device names, which is no big deal. You just have to, once you've done the restore, you have to go in and reassign the true device names to WAN or LAN or opt1. So you'll need some documentation as to where your wires are going, right, out of your ports on the back of the machine. And to restore, we should talk about this. So you can back up. You can select. I don't want to back up the packages with the backup, so or not. You can also encrypt it, which is probably a good idea if you're going to leave this sitting around anywhere, because handing someone all your encryption keys is probably not the smartest thing to do. And then to restore, you just browse for the file and then hit the restore. Now, this is going to restart the machine if I do this. I'm not actually going to do this today, but after it restores, it will restart the machine so that the configuration can take place. Let's see, we have a DHCP relay, we have DHCP server, and this is where you can go in. And you can change your range of your DHCP addresses that you want to issue. So, and this has kind of a wide one. I don't know if I would, I personally wouldn't leave that wide of a DHCP range. I generally manage my networks with static IP addresses as just habit. because then you know that the traffic that is DHCP is either something new that you're setting up or it's someone that you didn't expect to be on your network. So yeah. Let's see, what else we got? IGP proxies, we have load balancer, network, yeah. So let's talk about this one. So UNP and NAT PMP, these are, this is a protocol that allows for automation of network firewall rules from devices like they might be IoT devices, they might be your toaster, they might be your oven, they might be your refrigerator or your TV. That need to be able to open firewall ports in order for them to function with the internet and spy on you. Oh, did I say that? No, I didn't mean that. So you probably aren't going to want to have this open, have this running, and allow it to just make willy-nilly changes to your WAN configuration, which would affect everything on your network. So you might want to create kind of a segregated LAN for your noisy devices, I call them, the IoT devices, and maybe also your wireless devices. And I would not separate those with a VLAN. I would separate those with real hardware, with a real switch and a real piece of cable to do that. And then if you wanted to turn that on, you could allow it only for a specific, as you can see here, a specific interface that you could allow it on. I'm not going to turn it on, but that's kind of what that does. Wake on LAN is, I've seen this used in IT departments where they will occasionally, if at night when they're doing their updates or to the systems that they're having control, specifically, if you've gone home and your machine's gone to sleep, then Wake on LAN is a nice facility to wake them back up and allow them to then do the updates on those systems as needed. VPN, now, Pfsense only has 3 at present: IPsec, L2TP, and also OpenVPN. I understand they are working on Wireshark, and I don't know how soon that will be released. Pfsense is very conservative. They take their time, they test, they make sure that things are going to work. They don't just grab the latest and greatest widget and throw it into the system without thoroughly vetting it to make sure that there's not going to be any security holes. Does that mean they've never had any? Oh, no, that doesn't mean that at all. Sure, they've had them. There's always issues with security today. Our software is very complex. It doesn't get tested thoroughly. And sometimes things fall through the cracks, and it's easy for that to happen. So anyway, I know that's coming. It's just not now. So you can, I'll just open up this one for example. So you can specify an OpenVPN server, which would mean Pfsense is serving as the OpenVPN server. And that would be useful to allow people across your WAN, or you might require it to go across internal networks, so that if you have like the noisy LAN, the IoT LAN, you may not want to grant that access to your LAN without, say, a VPN to cross it. It would just prevent that traffic from coming across, and there's no way that it could accidentally get there, because without the VPN, the firewall rules would just simply block it. Client one would be the opposite, where you want Pfsense to provide the linkage between all of the clients and a centralized VPN server. So say like if you were using PIA VPN, for example, you can configure that software up in the client side of this, and then you can grant it to a group or to an entire segment of the LAN to use that. I've even seen it where they have used certain IP addresses, so that if the client signs on with those IP addresses, then they automatically go into the VPN. So yeah, you can get quite specific with that, and then there's the client-specific overrides, and then the wizard to help you set one up. Status is just like there's the dashboard. We already saw that. You can look at if there are any DHCP releases. You can see what those are. DNS resolver. I don't, it would show you some statistics about this if it was active. This one isn't. Your gateways, again, that information is out on the front, and that's exactly the same. It's still pending. So it'll be pending forever. There's no cable there. Let's see. Then the interfaces, we've seen that one too. You can release the IP address and have it reacquire a new one. And it just gives you some information about the other parts of it. So I guess that's all right. Monitoring, this is monitoring the system, not the network. A little bit, so it's going to show you what's going on with the system. I mean, what processes are taking up additional resources and where those might be consuming time in the system. So it's not network. There are other utilities for that. NTP, OpenVPN, so if you had them up and running, then the instances would show here, and it would show you that it was connected. It would show you that it connected to this VPN server, and it's now offering this IP address as the proxy for your VPN session. Queues, services, again, services, we've seen that. System logs, I can review and see all the different logs that are in the system, from the operating system to the firewall type of rules that are sent through, and then it shows you the type of now these rules you can configure, and I'll show you that later in the system, and then not today but later. And I'll show you kind of what's going on here. But you can look at all the way across in settings. Normal view, dynamic view will update. And then there's a summary view, which shows what's been going on kind of in a long term. You can kind of get an idea of what IP addresses have been going on. Dead Beef Cafe. Okay. Yeah, I always see some interesting ones that are floating around. Let's see. Traffic graph. That's the front. If you have this turned on and enabled, this would show you what rules were being changed by the protocol. Diagnostics has the ARP table. And we'll show you what systems are attached. Let's see. Let's get back over here. The backup and restore. Command prompt, you just want to drop to the command. You can do some tests like a DNS lookup. You can edit files. You can push the system back to its factory defaults, halt it. Whatever else you need to do here, reboot it. Look at the routes. Look at your smart status on your hard drives. What sockets are in place. This is basically just looking at stuff. As far as help is concerned, you have a number of things here. You have a BSD handbook that's available to you, and then you have the Pfsense book as well. You will need an internet connection for this, however. And it's a very good book. I mean, if you take the time and read this, they will handhold you through setting up a VPN, setting up a new certificate, or adding a second layer of authentication to your systems, and that sort of thing. The other thing that you can do, I don't know if it's in the services or not, but I think back out here we'll probably see it better. You'll notice there's the SSH here, and enable secure cell. SSH is off by default on the server. You don't want to have that turned on firewall necessarily, but you can turn it on occasionally if you wish to allow people to get in. And then if they log in, this is the menu they see. They can, however, drop to a shell right here, and that would, of course, be as whatever privileges that particular user has. So if they were logging in as root, they would have root privileges on your machine. But yeah, so you can do that, and then you can disable it after you've used it. So if you need to do something with the system itself, you need to get in and modify some configurations or pull some logs or whatever, you can do that, and then you can turn it back off again when you're done. So that's my beginning here. There's an awful lot to it. I mean, Pfsense does a ton of stuff. It is not, I mean, you can't, calling this a firewall is really not doing it justice. It is really a security suite. But how much of it is practical in today's age? And that's probably a topic for some other time. Things have changed in the security world. And sadly, firewalls are having to adapt to more and more intelligence from both the attackers and the ability to circumvent them. So Pfsense has been adding some of the additional sophistication to the firewall in order to counter it. You know, it is an arms race. I've said this before. If you add this feature and your adversary defeats it. You add that feature, your adversary defeats it. It's just a constant arms race. So yeah. Anyway, it's a great product. I think after you get used to it, I remember the first time I worked with it. It was like drinking from a fire hose, as with most software that like this is. But after you've kind of been around it for a while, you kind of start getting it, and it isn't that difficult to work with. I would say probably the one thing I wish that it had in the diagnostics was a way to go through and make sure that you don't have something in a cascade, a firewall rule in a cascade that inadvertently exposes a protocol that you didn't intend to be, because firewall rules go in top-down fashion. So the one at the bottom is the last one that it hits. That is used to, if it gets that far, then that's the one that determines what is allowed to be done. The ones up above it are the ones that they're kind of like filters. This is asking for this port and that's closed by. This one is asking for an address out here and that's blocked by. And then when you get down to the bottom, the only thing left is to allow you to get in. So I wish there was something that that had that kind of a detail to it. Maybe you guys know of one. Maybe it's a third-party application. I would love to know about it if you do. Hope to see you again real soon. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know what you would like to see, and I'll put together a list, and I'll start working on this as well. Hope to see you again real soon. Bye for now.